What's going on YouTube? This is BoxingWave. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right, let's get into it. Canelo Alvarez is going to be fighting Avni Yildirim this Saturday on DAZN. I believe the card starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, and the main event is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern. All right. So this fight is supposed to be for Avni Yildirim is the mandatory for the WBC title, and one of the titles that Canelo is currently holding. Okay, he is unified, and Avni Yildirim is coming off a controversial technical decision against Anthony Durrell. All right, from back in 2019, it was a technical decision loss for him. Okay, very controversial. A lot of people feel that Yildirim won the fight on the cards. The fight was stopped due to a headbutt. All right, and a bad cut that Anthony Durrell suffered late in the fight, and they stopped the fight, and Durrell won on points. Okay, very very close fight. I remember watching the fight and not really scoring it or anything like that. I just remember watching it, and it's like one of those fights where you're not taking seriously. You're watching it because Yildirim, I had already seen him getting knocked out by Chris Eubank Jr. And when I saw this fight, I was like, oh, I've seen what Durrell can do. I thought that Durrell was probably going to destroy him, and he didn't. Yildirim gave him a tough fight, and you're watching him fight, you're like, damn, well, Durrell might actually lose this fight. You're not even like really paying attention to it until it gets real, and now it's like, oh shit, this is a real fight. So he's coming off of that, and he hasn't fought since then. And Canelo has just recently beat Callum Smith, and he's preparing to be active this year. He's already scheduled to fight Billy Joe Saunders in May, and he's supposedly having 2 more fights this year. Now, if he can have 4 fights in 1 year, that would be great. I mean, I say this all the time with fighters. I wish these top level fighters fought more times a year. I would love for these guys to do it at least 3 times a year. That would be great. 4 times is amazing. If you're an elite level fighter and you fight 4 times a year, that would be great. I know at one point Kovalev was doing that. I know Triple G was even doing that at one point. Okay, I wish fighters did that more because it would keep them in shape, and they won't always have to fight the very elite fighters back to back to back. You know what I'm saying? People like to go back and talk about Chavez Sr. and how many bums he faced throughout his career. And I'm like, yeah, but Chavez Sr. is fighting a lot of fighters, and he's very, very active throughout the year. And I wish fighters went back to that. I don't know if they need to fight 5, 6 times a year. I'm not saying that. But 3, 4 times a year should be the standard. And I think it keeps you fit. It keeps you responsible. You won't blow up and wait in between fights because you have to stay some sort. Yeah, you could take a little break and, for a couple of weeks, but get back in the gym and work. You should be a full-time boxer. These guys are elite fighters. You should be a full-time boxer in between fights, like at least staying fit, But look, this fight, let's not make it more than what it is. All right, this is a stay busy fight for Canelo. And Avni Yildirim, I won't go as far as calling him a journeyman, because I believe, like, when it comes to like labeling people, like labeling these fighters, I think journeyman is like a step below like contender. At least the way that I use it. I don't know how everybody uses terminology, but if you're a top contender, if you've been in a ring with the top guys and you're like a top, like if you're a mandatory, at that point, you're a contender to me. All right. He's a contender. All right. If you want to label him as a journeyman, well, he's a good journeyman. All right. But regardless, he doesn't have any real big wins in his career. All right. Everybody knows him from the loss to Chris Eubank Jr. He beat Marco Antonio Paraban, who was in a ring with a lot of other fighters, okay, at one point. But outside of that, he hasn't really accomplished much. All right. stylistically, and if we're talking technically, like what I see from him in the ring, he's a worker. He's a worker, you know, but he's not flashy. He's not bringing any kind of, he's not really specifically great at anything, you know. He's a worker. He can outwork you. You've seen that in the Durrell fight. He's a guy that comes forward. He doesn't have crazy reflexes. He doesn't have great counterpuncher ability or anything like that. He's a guy that is going to keep throwing. He's going to come forward and keep throwing. And he can surprise you because of his work rate. And if you're a guy like Anthony Durrell, who he faced and who he had a close fight with, who is always had poor conditioning issues, you know, he fights at spurts. If you a guy like Durrell and you can't get him out of there, he can give you a rough night. You know, you got to get him out of there, you know. But against Chris Eubank Jr., a guy that constantly used his jab, all right, and was very mobile, and Yildirim really doesn't have the technical ability to slip shots and counter, and he doesn't have the reflexes and the timing. He had trouble trying to get in range of Chris Eubank Jr., and Eubank eventually knocked him out, all right. Didn't take him that long to do so. I think he even dropped him early in that fight. So what is Yildirim really bringing? He's not really bringing anything that Canelo hasn't seen before. He's actually one of Canelo's weaker opponents in recent years. Okay, Rocky Fielding was Canelo's one of Canelo's weaker opponents. I think what sold people onto Rocky Fielding was the fact that Rocky was so much taller than Canelo. You know, people recently thought the same with Callum Smith, but Callum Smith was actually a lot more legit. Whereas Rocky, he really didn't have any kind of advantages there outside of him just being big. And Canelo just broke him down very easily and stopped him. Avni doesn't really bring anything, and I think the problem with it is he's going to be coming forward, but he's going to be coming forward with that tight guard, and he's just going to be trying to inch as close to Canelo as he could. But the danger is in the inside as well. The danger is just not on the outside. You know what I'm saying? And he doesn't really have anything to keep Canelo off him. Like, if he's the fighter that's on his back foot, all right, and if he's looking to pop shot Canelo or work behind his jab and keep the distance from Canelo, he doesn't have anything to keep Canelo away there neither. So he's screwed either way. You know, if he's coming forward trying to pressure Canelo, you can't pressure. Canelo has done 24 rounds with Triple G. You know, he's been in there with pressure fighters. There's not really anything that Avni is giving to him that we haven't seen from him. I mean, yes, he's taller. So what? We've seen what taller guys, you know, could do against Canelo. It doesn't really matter. So, yeah, let's not fool ourselves here. I think Canelo is going to give him a few rounds. All right, because he just wants to be active. He wants to stay busy. He has a tough fight coming up next against Billy Joe Saunders. I believe it to be a tough fight. It's a fight that I really wanted to see. I don't want to see this fight. I don't think anyone is asking for this fight, but it's a stay busy fight. Is it the worst fight in the world? No, it's not the worst fight in the world, because apparently a lot of fighters are Canelo's level, or maybe a little below Canelo's level, is fighting guys like Avni Yildirim on a regular basis, or even worse. You know, so am I going to slander Canelo for fighting this guy? I mean, is his mandatory, number one? And number two, if I slander Canelo for fighting this guy, I would have to slander everybody else within those divisions from 168, 160, or whatever. They're all fighting guys at this level or much worse. Can't really slander Canelo if he's going to fight 4 times a year, if he just fought Callum Smith, if he fought Kovalev and Dan Jacobs before that, if he plans on fighting Billy Joe Saunders, and I don't know, maybe Caleb Plant after that. I can't slander him for that. I can't slander him for fighting this guy, especially if he's going to be actively fighting. If he fought him and this is whole one fight of the year, Avni Yildirim, and that's all we get from him, then yeah, I'll be pretty pissed off. But no, I don't want to see the fight. But at the same time, I understand why it's happening. You know, he's fighting in between this fight I'm sorry, the Callum Smith fight and the Billy Joe Saunders fight, which is a real fight. All right, so Avni Yildirim, I don't really think on the technical. This is not a breakdown video because like I said, the role of Avni is just to be a stay busy fighter, and I don't think he has anything there. He's not super explosive. He doesn't have big power. He's just a worker. He's just a worker, and I think once you neutralize his work rate, he really doesn't have nothing that he can bring to the table. And Chris Eubank Jr. already exposed that. Now, has he gotten better? Has he gotten better since then? Possibly, yeah. All right, but still, there's nothing that I've seen from him that Canelo hasn't seen before. You know, even if you go back and look at like the James Kirkland fight or like these guys that were pressure fighters back then. Like I said, Canelo already showed us that he can deal with those guys, you know? All right, so the fight is this weekend. I'm not sure if I'm going to cover it live. If I do, I will let you guys know. I would definitely notify you guys if I am planning to go on live that day, that night, to watch the fight with you guys. I'll definitely try to be on live with you guys. But this is not a huge fight. It's just not. Let's be real about it. It's just not a huge fight. It's just a stay busy fight, and that's all it is. You know, the opportunity, if you want to see Canelo fight, and I'm sure you guys, there's a lot of Canelo fans on here. If you just want to see him fight, that's all it is. But it's just a stay busy fight, and I think Canelo's going to give him a few rounds. I think if Canelo really wanted to, he can probably dust him off within 2 rounds. And it's not because Avni is a horrible fighter. He's not He's not a bad fighter at all. It's just that Canelo is at that very, very elite level, and I think he would be able to get him out of here within 3 rounds if he really wanted to. But I say Canelo Duke. You know, I think Canelo's gonna go some rounds with him. I don't think it's gonna be competitive, but I don't think Canelo's looking to go in there and just blow him away. I think he's just trying to get some work in there before he goes into the fight with Billy Joe Saunders. Especially stylistically, there's no comparisons between Avni Yildirim and Billy Joe Saunders neither. You know, Avni is just, he's a mandatory, and Canelo just has to fight him. You know? All right, so that's my views on it. I don't think there's anything else that need to be said here about this fight. You know, but if I am going on live, I'll see you guys Saturday. All right? Peace.